Fair warning, this doll ended up being fairly spooky and there's a lot of art included in this video which is from an 18 rated game, so proceed at your own risk. Hiya everybody and welcome back to another ooky spooky Hallow Poopy video. Today's doll was made in collaboration with lots of lovely talented people on Instagram, so if you want to see everybody's dolls, check the link in the description below. Once again, Doll Colour has hosted an absolutely incredible collab. I had so much fun working with everybody. Yeah, this collab was amazing and I'm so proud of my doll, so without further ado, let's begin. For this year's doll, I wanted to push the boat out and try something completely out of my art style: gore. Usually my art style has remained fairly colourful, cartoonish, usually landscape art, so I really wanted to challenge myself this year and do something in the complete polar opposite, because why not? I've had The Witcher 3 on my mind for a long time, and I felt like Halloween was the perfect time to create a Witcher-inspired doll. There's a shit ton of monsters to choose from in the Witcher universe, but the one that I felt drawn to was the Pastels, also known as the Plague Maiden. And I can't promise that I didn't choose this doll for obvious reasons, because, well, I did. This monster can be found on Fag Isle in Velin, and is part of the quest A Tower Full of Mice. The quest is quite sad and has this Romeo and Juliet vibe to it. Don't worry, I'm not going to spoil it for you. But the design of the monster is really interesting. It looks more akin to a zombie than a wraith. It has rotted flesh, it's very emaciated with no bottom jaw and a hella long tongue. She's also wearing this torn and ruined skirt and appears to be floating as though she is a spectre, because that's the class that she is. She looks very similar in design to a night wraith and a noon wraith, but their designs are all different, but we'll get to that part later. So I purchased Sculpt. Her body is perfect for the Plague Maiden, and I'm hoping we can do something to the legs to make her appear like she's floating, maybe? The first stage, of course, is always to prep the doll. I already knew in advance I wasn't going to use Sculpt's head because it's going to be modded anyway, so I removed it. I needed to choose a replacement. I settled on 3 options: Ghoulia, Spectra and Frankie. I ended up choosing Spectra. She has both of what the other 2 have: Ghoulia's cheekbones with Frankie's lower jaw. I assumed at this point that having the wider jaw would make mods easier when we get to them, so I trusted my instincts and went with Spectra. I removed all of her accessories and her hair with my lovely new scissors. I decided not to keep the hair because, if truth be told, in the 2 years I've been doing this hobby I've not once reused saved doll hair, so in the bin it goes. I used some acetone to remove the factory paint from her head and face and had a thorough read of Darilli's head shrinking guide. I opted for the fast shrink method, so I soaked it for roughly 2 hours and then left it to dry for a whole day. Shrunk after the first soak, so I did a second, and this time it shrunk about half a centimetre. That doesn't seem like a lot, but compared to a non-shrunken head, it looks a lot smaller. Once the head was doing its own thing and pickling away, I started sculpting work on the body itself. I used air dry clay to fill in the stomach portion of the body and also to fill in the ribs and also the back. fairly good apart from the unsightly crack below her ribs, but we'll fix that later. I decided to leave the body to fully dry before doing anything else to it, so in the meantime I made some wefts. Can I just say, although the project I was working on was really dark, I put some rainbow film on my skylight in my bedroom, so like all day long I had rainbows moving around and it looked amazing. Anyways, once the clay on the body had fully dried, I left this for about a day, I think. I tried to think of a way to make her arms less bony and more super skinny like her torso. I knew clay nor epoxy were viable options because of how bendy Skeleta's body is. It's really not hard plastic, it's really soft. I really liked how the hot glue nails looked on my Pride doll, so I thought the same would work here for this doll. I honestly can't remember where I saw this, I think it was a Hextube video. It dawned on me very quickly that this glue, in thin enough quantities, was still really flexible, so I'd ended up using the hot glue to fill in the arms so they looked more emaciated and thin. You can't really tell the effect at the minute, but I trusted my instincts and thought that this was going to work, so you'll just have to wait for me on this one. Even though I was being as careful as possible, I don't know if it was me handling the doll or whether the clay shrank a little bit, but there was still some cracking in the sculpt on the stomach. To maintain the emaciated look, I knew adding more clay on top of that wasn't an option. One type of glue I have a love-hate relationship with is Modge Podge. It's so thick and strong for a basic glue. I stopped using it for wefts a long time ago because of how hard it dries, but I thought it might work well in patching up the doll. I applied 3 generous coats to the whole entire body, hands and all, body, ribs, everything. If this doll was going to be knocked over and crack at any point, I'm hoping this glue can at least stop the clay from falling out of the body. Once that was done, I painted 2 layers of gesso to the body to prepare for the paint job. This is my first time using gesso for anything, and it dries more opaque than when it's applied. It's really weird stuff. I let this fully dry, and in the meantime I tried out a crappy and quick homemade pattern for the skirt portion of the doll. Going back to the original art of the Plague Maiden, the skirt is fairly raggedy, torn, and is also really dirty, so I knew that this didn't have to be perfect. I used some tracing paper to drape on the body, and by the way, this was really hard because paper doesn't drape. And I added an extra little bit along the bottom of the skirt to make it longer. I roughed up the fabric by chopping in random holes and basically slashing at the fabric with my X-Acto knife, and also chopping the bottom so it's a little bit more ribbony, stretching the fabric so that it frays. You get the idea. How you would not normally handle doll clothes. Not wanting to use a shit ton of acrylic paint to dye the skirt brown, and also not having any brown dye, I decided to resort to ye old method of using tea to stain it. My ancestors would be turning in their graves. Did anyone else used to make fake treasure maps in school with tea bags? You'd stain the paper brown with a tea and then draw maps or write old-fashioned letters. Maybe that's just British schools, I don't know. Once the head had finished evaporating all of its acetone goodness, I chopped open the top of it, as at this point I decided I wanted to add some green LEDs. Why green, do you ask? When the pasta is inside the tower, she appears more ghost-like, so takes on this really bright green form. I was originally going to do this bright green version, if you will, but decided it would be very easy to fuck up because the colours just in my head didn't really work together. But it's okay, we can achieve a similar effect with some green LEDs, but we'll get to that later. Back to the head. I decided to chop off the nose, doll motion style, and looked back at Delightful's Banshee video so I could gauge the amount of jaw chopping a bit better. I didn't want to chop too much in case resculpting it was a ball ache, so I decided that less is most definitely more. I made a faint line with some pen, and once I was happy with that, I chopped the mouth away. I also thinned out the backs of the eyes inside the head so that the lights hopefully come through a bit better. Hopefully. So I shaved down the hole inside of the head where the neck peg sits. I also shaved down the neck peg itself, and that's where my stupidity really shined through. Back to the head. I wanted to strengthen the brow and cheekbones ever so slightly in order to make her look more skeletal. This is why I decided to shrink the head so that it's smaller in comparison to other Monster High doll heads. I did originally try with clay, but it wasn't sticking, so I had to go to epoxy. The reason I don't really like working with epoxy is because you kind of need to wear gloves when using it, and gloves make everything 10 times harder to work on, especially on this small of a scale, and this is why you see me using some silicone tools. It makes working with epoxy and clay surprisingly easy. I always make a point of trying not to touch my face when using this stuff, so you should do the same. Do as I say and not as I do. Sculpting the teeth was hard because I had to hold it right up to my face because of how tiny they are. I knew here that I chopped the face open a little bit too much, so I used some hot glue to close it a bit more. So going back to the skirt, there's a lot of backing to here, isn't there? Once dried, it came through lighter than I was expecting, but still, a little bit of colour into the fabric was better than none at all. I mixed and watered down some dark, earthy colours, starting off with a brown and eventually adding a green to make the skirt look old and mouldy. When we look at the original 3 designs for the Noon Wraith, Night Wraith, and then also the Pesta, these are the differences that I'm talking about. The Plague Maiden is a bringer of disease and death, so she has a much more of a greener tone to her compared to the other 2. A Noon Wraith is caused by a woman who was killed before her wedding, hence the white dress, and the Night Wraith is sort of similar, though it's not entirely clear within the lore. But the base of all 3 of these different types of wraiths is that they all appear because of some unfinished business that they didn't get to do whilst they were alive, so they turn into these spectres. If you would like to read some more Witcher lore, there is a link in the description down below. On the second pass over the skirt, I found it was much easier to wet the fabric first and then paint on the different colours. On this second pass, I added some watered down red patches for more depth and also some more mouldy colours, because why not? And this is where the fun really begins, because this was time for the paint job. And just when I thought I was done with the body, I looked back and it looked a little bit too clean. So I added some more blood splatters to her back because I felt like I kind of neglected that a little bit. To finish off the skirt, I decided to add some wire to the inside to make it poseable. I tested a piece of fabric with a hot glue gun because I wasn't sure if the glue would show up on the outside, and thankfully it didn't. It was at this point that I decided she was way too tall, so I chopped off her feet above the ankle and embedded them into some air drying clay. Using a back stitch, I attached the two sides of the skirt together by hand, and I couldn't be bothered to rethread my machine for the sake of one small line of stitching, to be honest, so by hand it is. I appear to have lost this footage along the way somewhere, but I made the tongue from a small armature wire and some air dry clay. I first painted it a sort of dirty greyish pink and then dry brushed it grey and dark red. Same with the body. And I would say let's dress her up, but there's not much to dress up here for once. And that's 95% of the doll finish, so let's add her LED lights. So to save you some time on me explaining how long it took for us to make this circuit, here's a very rough sketch of the circuit that we made for the inside of the head. The basic premise is that on the second attempt of trying to make... I'm sorry, hang on. Okay, on the second attempt of trying to make this circuit, we kind of blew up a battery. And it sent solder flying everywhere. Don't ask. Don't ask. so much for watching, it really means a lot to me. I really hope you enjoyed this doll. She was such a struggle, but so worth it in the end, I think. If you enjoyed this video and if you would like to see more from me, please don't forget to hit subscribe, like, share it with your friends, hit the bell button so that you receive notifications for every time that I upload, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!